The forgotten promise said rain fell heavy on the glass windows of the quiet café. Sandra Bullock sat in the corner, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea. She looked tired, not from the weather, but from the weight she carried inside her. Life seemed bright to everyone outside, filled with success, awards, and fame. But in truth, her heart was restless. It was a feeling she did not share with anyone, not even with those closest to her. That night, she remembered a moment from many years ago, a moment so simple, yet it stayed with her. It was during the filming of a movie that would change her career forever. She was young, nervous, and afraid of making mistakes. The world was watching, and every move she made felt like it could either lift her up or break her completely. In the middle of that fear, one man had spoken to her with honesty and kindness. Keanu Reeves. Keanu was already known, already respected, but he carried himself with a quiet strength that never looked down on others. He had noticed her silence between takes. He had seen the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact. One evening, as the crew packed up, he walked over and sat beside her. He did not speak at first. He just sat, letting the silence breathe. Then he said in his calm voice, "You do not have to prove yourself to anyone. Just be you. That is enough." Those words were like light cutting through fog. She smiled faintly at him, not knowing what to say. Keanu's words felt so real, so different from the usual compliments and empty encouragements she often heard. There was no pressure in his tone, no judgment, just truth. And from that moment on, she felt less alone. Now, years later, as she sat in the café, she wondered why that memory was coming back. She had been through so much since then: success, heartbreak, the loss of people she loved, and the struggle to remain grounded in a world that often demanded perfection. Maybe it was because she had drifted away from those values. She had allowed herself to be surrounded by noise, by expectations, by the pressure to be someone more than human. The door to the café opened, and the sound of footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. She looked up, surprised. Keanu walked in, dressed simply in dark jeans and a worn jacket. There was no shine of celebrity about him, no desire to be noticed. He carried himself with the same quiet humility she remembered. Their eyes met, and for a moment it felt like time folded back on itself. Keanu smiled gently, walking over to her table. "Mind if I sit?" he asked softly. Her throat tightened, and she nodded. He sat across from her, his presence calm, his eyes steady. No need for grand greetings, no need for staged smiles. Just real friendship. After a moment of silence, Sandra whispered, "I was just thinking about you." Keanu tilted his head slightly, curiosity in his eyes. "Good things, I hope." "The best," she replied, her voice breaking slightly. "Do you remember years ago, when you told me that I was enough, that I didn't have to prove myself?" He leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I remember. You looked like you were carrying too much. I wanted you to know you didn't have to." Her eyes grew wet with tears she had been holding back. "I never forgot those words. They saved me, more than once." Keanu looked down at his hands, then back at her. Sometimes the smallest truth can keep us standing when everything else feels heavy. The cafe around them faded into the background. It felt like the world had stopped, just for them. Sandra realized something then. This was not just a meeting by chance. Maybe life was reminding her of something she had lost along the way. Respect, humility, kindness. But, before she could say more, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down. A message from her manager. Urgent. It pulled her back into the storm of her world. She sighed, pressing the phone face down. Keanu noticed the frustration in her eyes. "You don't have to answer right now," he said. "Sometimes the world can wait. Sometimes you need to breathe first." Those words cut into her again, the way they had years ago. Gentle, real, for the first time in a long time. Sandra felt safe enough to let her shoulders relax. But she didn't know that this simple meeting, this quiet reunion, would set off a chain of events that would test their friendship, reveal hidden truths, and bring them both face to face with choices that would shape not only their lives, but the lives of those who watched them. What began as a humble gesture of friendship was about to grow into something far bigger than either of them expected. The hidden Waith rain had stopped outside, leaving the streets glistening like glass. Inside the café, the quiet stillness wrapped around Keanu and Sandra as they sat together. For a long moment, they didn't speak. The silence between them was not empty. It was warm, like two people who understood each other without the need for many words. But beneath Sandra's calm face, her heart was troubled. She had built a life that looked perfect from the outside, yet inside she carried pain no one saw. The world celebrated her talent, her beauty, her strength. But when the cameras turned off, she was left alone with her doubts. Even now, sitting across from Keanu, she wondered if he could sense it. Keanu studied her quietly. He had always been that way, watchful, patient, never rushing to fill a space with noise. Finally, he said, "You look tired, Sandra. Not the kind of tired a night's sleep can fix." His words cut through her mask. She lowered her eyes to the tea in front of her, tracing the rim of the cup with her finger. "I guess I am," she admitted softly. "Sometimes I feel like I am running a race I never signed up for. I don't even know where the finish line is anymore." Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "You don't have to run if it's hurting you. You can slow down. The world will still keep spinning." She let out a small laugh, but it was hollow. "You say that like it's simple, but you don't see the pressure. The calls, the contracts, the endless expectations. If I stop, everything falls apart." "Everything," Keanu repeated slowly, his eyes searching hers. "Or just the parts that were never real to begin with?" His question struck deep. She looked at him, surprised by the honesty. No one had ever dared to ask her something like that. Most people told her what she wanted to hear, or what they wanted from her. But Keanu was different. He always had been. Before she could answer, the cafe door opened again. A small group of fans walked in, whispering, pointing, their eyes widening, as they noticed who was sitting in the corner. Sandra tensed, her hand tightening around her cup. She wasn't in the mood to smile, to pretend she was fine. But Keanu placed his hand gently on the table between them, not touching hers, but close enough that she felt his presence. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You don't owe anyone a performance right now." The fans approached slowly, nervous but eager. One of them, a young girl, no older than 12, stepped forward. She held out a small notebook with trembling hands. "Miss Bullock," she whispered, Could I have your autograph?" Sandra froze. Her heart raced. But then she looked into the girl's wide, hopeful eyes and saw something she had forgotten: the way a simple gesture could change someone's day. She took the notebook, signed it with care, and handed it back. The girl's face lit up, and she whispered, "Thank you, you're my hero." As the group walked away, Sandra blinked back tears. Keanu's calm eyes were on her again. "See?" he said softly. "That wasn't pressure. That was connection. You gave her something real, not because you had to, but because you wanted to." Sandra leaned back, letting the truth sink in. Maybe she had been drowning not because of the people who believed in her, but because of the world that demanded more than she could give. She took a deep breath. "You always make things sound so clear," she said. Keanu smiled faintly. "Not clear, just honest. Honesty is the only thing that doesn't get heavy when you carry it." His words stayed in her chest, like an echo. She felt lighter, but she also felt afraid. Because deep down, she knew he was right. She had been chasing things that were not real, and if she let them go, what would be left of her? The rain began. Again outside, tapping against the glass. Sandra looked at Keanu, her voice trembling. What if I've already lost myself? What if there's nothing real left? Keanu's expression softened. He leaned forward, his voice steady, almost like a promise. Then we find it again, piece by piece. You don't have to do it alone. The words struck her heart with such force that she had to look away. She had not realized until that moment how much she longed to hear them. What she didn't know was that the days ahead would test that promise in ways neither of them expected. Secrets from the past would rise, decisions would cut deep, and friendship itself would be placed on the edge of breaking. But for now, in the small café, with rain on the windows, all she felt was the quiet strength of a friend who had never stopped believing in her. The silence between storms. Next morning, Sandra woke up early. The city outside her window was still half asleep, the streets quiet under the soft gray of dawn. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her meeting with Keanu replayed in her mind again and again. The way he spoke with honesty, the calmness in his eyes, the reminder that she did not have to carry her world alone. But the moment she reached for her phone, reality returned. Unread messages, urgent calls, deadlines. Her manager had already sent 3 texts, demanding her attention. She sighed, placing the phone face down on the nightstand. For once, she didn't want to start the day running. She wanted to hold on to the peace she had felt in that cafe hours later. Sandra was sitting in her car outside a studio building. It was another meeting, another demand for her time. She gripped the steering wheel tightly. Inside, her chest was heavy. She didn't want to go in? Not today. Not when she had finally remembered what it felt like to breathe. A knock on the window startled her. She looked up and saw Keanu standing there, his familiar calm expression on his face. He motioned for her to roll down the window. "You're early," he said, his voice gentle. She blinked in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I had a meeting nearby," he explained simply. "Thought I'd walk over and say hello. Looks like I found you hiding." She let out a breathless laugh. "Is it that obvious?" He nodded slightly. "You look like someone about to run a marathon without shoes." His words made her laugh again, but this time it broke into something deeper, release of the tension she had been carrying. "I don't want to go in," she admitted quietly. "I feel like they'll take more of me than I have to give." Keanu leaned against her car, folding his arms. "Then don't. Sometimes walking away is stronger than forcing yourself to. Stay." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "But if I walk away, I'll disappoint them. I'll ruin things. I'll lose everything I worked for." Keanu shook his head. "You won't lose yourself. That's the one thing you can't afford to give away." Sandra sat in silence, his words hitting her like thunder. No one had ever spoken to her like that. They all told her to push harder, to keep going, to sacrifice more. But Keanu was telling her to stop, to breathe, to protect herself. After a moment, he asked softly, "Do you want me to go in with you? Not as a coaster, not as anything else, just as your friend." The offer struck her heart. She nodded slowly, feeling tears rise in her eyes. "Yes, I think I need that." Together they walked inside. The studio lobby buzzed with activity, voices, and movement. Sandra felt the familiar weight press down on her chest. But beside her, Keanu walked calmly, his presence grounding her. When they entered the meeting room, her manager and the executives looked up in surprise. "Keanu Reeves," one of them said, half shocked, half delighted. "What a surprise." Keanu only nodded politely. Then he took the chair beside Sandra, saying nothing more. His silence was louder than any speech. It was a reminder to everyone in that room that she was not alone. The meeting began, filled with demands, contracts, and endless expectations. Sandra felt herself start to shrink under the pressure. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the documents. Then, without speaking, Keanu placed his hand flat on the table beside her. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. The gesture was enough. Sandra took a deep breath and spoke. "I need time," she said firmly. The room fell silent. "I can't keep rushing from one thing to the next without space to live. If you want me to give my best, I need to breathe." Her manager shifted uncomfortably. The executives exchanged glances. It was not what they expected from her. But Sandra didn't back down. Keanu's quiet strength beside her gave her courage. After a long silence, one of the executives finally nodded. "Take the time you need. We'll adjust." The meeting ended faster than she imagined. As they walked out, Sandra felt both shaky and powerful at the same time. Outside the building, she turned to Keanu, her voice breaking. "I don't think I could have done that alone." Keanu smiled faintly. "You didn't need me to speak. You only needed someone to remind you that your voice matters." Sandra's throat tightened with emotion. "You always remind me of that." He looked at her, his eyes steady and warm. "Because it's true." But as they stood there in the quiet street, Sandra knew something deeper was coming. Life was not finished testing her, and their friendship, as strong as it was, would soon be pulled into storms neither of them could predict. The storm behind the curtains, following week, moved slowly, but not quietly. Sandra had taken the break she demanded, yet her phone did not stop buzzing. News outlets speculated about her decision. Some headlines praised her courage, others questioned if she was losing her edge. She tried to ignore it, but the noise still found its way into her heart. Keanu, on the other hand, stayed calm as always. He checked in on her with short messages, never overwhelming her, just a simple, "How are you holding up?" or "Remember to eat today." His words were steady, like anchors when the waves threatened to pull her under. One evening, Sandra invited him over to her house. She hadn't done that in years. Her home was beautiful, but lonely, filled with empty spaces that spoke of how much she gave to the world but how little she kept for herself. Keanu walked in quietly, noticing the framed photos, the awards, the elegant design, but he also noticed the silence, the way it echoed more than it should have. "You don't really live here, do you?" he asked softly. Sandra looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" "Of course I live here." He shook his head, glancing around. "You sleep here, you rest here, but living, that's different. Living is when the walls carry laughter, when the rooms feel like they're breathing. With you, this place feels like it's waiting for you to come home, but you never really arrive." Her chest tightened at his words. He was right. She filled her life with work, appearances, responsibilities, but she rarely gave herself permission to simply exist within her own walls. They sat together in the living room. Sandra poured tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Sometimes I wonder if I built all of this for everyone else, not for me. It looks like a home, but it doesn't feel like one." Keanu leaned forward, his voice calm. "Then change it. Start small. Put pieces of yourself in it. Not what others expect, but what makes you breathe easier." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound simple." "It is," he said. "Simple doesn't mean easy, but it's always possible." Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of her phone. Sandra hesitated, then answered. Her manager's voice came through, sharp and impatient. "We need to talk. Things are getting complicated. The press is spinning your break into something it's not. Sponsors are asking questions. We have to do damage control." Sandra closed her eyes, gripping the phone tightly. "I told you I needed time." "Time is money, Sandra," her manager shot back. "And right now, you're costing us both." Before she could reply, Keanu gently reached over and pressed the button to end the call. Sandra gasped, staring at him. "Why did you do that?" He looked at her calmly. "Because you don't need to be spoken to like that. You don't owe anyone your soul." Her hands shook, but not from anger. From the flood of relief she felt. She didn't know if she wanted to cry or laugh. No one had ever stood between her and that kind of pressure before. But the moment of comfort did not last. Later that night, while Keanu was preparing to leave, Sandra checked her phone again. Dozens of messages, some supportive, others cruel. One message, in particular, made her chest ache. It wasn't from her manager or the press, but from someone she had once considered family. The words were harsh, accusing her of selfishness, of forgetting where she came from, of letting down the people who had once believed in her. She set the phone down slowly, her face pale. Keanu noticed immediately. "What is it?" Her voice was small. "Someone I trusted thinks I've changed, that I'm not the person they knew." Keanu's eyes softened. People will always see what they want to see, but the ones who truly know, you will never question your heart. Sandra looked at him, her eyes wet with tears. "But what if they're right? What if I've lost myself?" He stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then we'll find you again, piece by piece. No storm lasts forever, Sandra. Sometimes the rain is only there to remind us of the sun." His words wrapped around her like shelter. But she knew the storm was far from over. The pressure from the outside world was growing louder, and soon it would force her to face truths she had buried deep. And what neither of them knew was that a secret from the past was about to resurface. One that would test not only their friendship, but also the very foundation of who they believed they were. The echo of the past days turned into weeks, and though Sandra tried to hold on to the calmness Keanu gave her, the outside world refused to stay quiet. Every magazine, every article, every television interview seemed to have her name in it. Some voices called her brave for stepping back. Others called her weak, selfish, or even lost. It felt like the world was speaking louder than she could dot. Keanu stayed close, not in ways that drew attention, but in quiet gestures. He would show up at her door with groceries. He would invite her to walk in the park, away from cameras. He would sit in her living room and let her talk, or let her sit in silence if that was all she needed. His presence was steady, like a lighthouse, when the sea grew wild. But one night, everything shifted. Sandra was going through an old box of letters in her study, trying to distract herself from the chaos outside. Tucked away at the bottom, she found an envelope she hadn't seen in years. It was from someone she once trusted deeply, a friend from her earliest days in Hollywood. The letter was raw, almost angry, written at a time when Sandra had chosen her career over her personal life. As she read, her chest grew heavy. The letter spoke of promises broken, of friendships abandoned, of pain she had caused without realizing it. The words stung. She had always thought she carried herself with kindness. But this letter painted her as someone blind to the needs of those who had once stood by her. Her hands trembled as she folded the letter again. That night, she could not sleep. Memories returned, the people she had lost touch with, the moments she had missed, the calls she had never returned. She wondered if the person in the letter was who she had become. The next morning, Keanu found her sitting on the back porch of her house, still in her robe, staring at the sunrise with tired eyes. He stepped quietly beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You didn't sleep," he said gently. She shook her head, her voice low. "I found something last night. A letter, from someone I used to call family. It said I hurt them, that I left them behind when I chased everything else." Keanu placed the coffee on the table and sat down. He didn't rush her, he waited. His silence steady, his patience endless. "What if it's true, Keanu?" she whispered. "What if I've been lying to myself all this time? What if I am not the person I thought I was?" He looked at her carefully, then spoke with quiet strength. "We all make mistakes, Sandra. Every single one of us. But mistakes don't erase who we are. They only remind us to be better. The fact that you care this much proves that you never stopped being you." Her eyes filled with tears. "But what if I can't fix it? What if it's too late?" He leaned closer, his voice steady. "Then you don't try to fix the past. You honor it by how you live now. Kindness isn't about erasing what's been done, it's about choosing today to be the friend, the person, the soul you want to be. Sandra let the words sink in. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part of her still carried the weight of that letter. As the days went on, she decided to try. She began reaching out to people she hadn't spoken to in years. Some answered with warmth, others didn't respond at all. Each call left her raw, but also lighter. One evening, after a long day of calls, she sat with Keanu again. She looked at him with tired eyes, but this time there was a small smile. "You were right," she said softly. "Maybe I can't change the past, but I can change today." He returned her smile, his eyes calm. "That's all any of us can do." But deep inside, Sandra knew her journey wasn't just about old friendships or lost promises. Something bigger was waiting just around the corner. She could feel it, a storm that would test everything she had rebuilt, and even the bond she now shared with Keanu. A single phone call, one that neither of them expected, was about to arrive and change the course of their story forever. The call that changed everything. The evening was quiet. Sandra had just finished dinner alone when her phone began to ring. At first, she thought it was her manager again, another demand, another pressure. She almost ignored it, but something about the number made her pause. It was unfamiliar, yet strangely heavy. She answered slowly, her voice uncertain. "Hello?" A silence came first, then a voice from the other end. It was low, fragile, almost broken. "Sandra, it's me." Her chest tightened instantly. It was a voice she hadn't heard in years, one she once knew better than her own. A friend she had lost along the way. The same friend who had written that painful letter she found days ago. Her breath caught. I didn't think you'd ever call me again." The voice trembled. "I almost didn't. But I saw the news. I saw everything. And I realized, maybe you're struggling too." Tears welled in Sandra's eyes. All the weight of guilt and regret returned in one wave. "I hurt you," she whispered. "I left when you needed me. I don't know if I can ever take that back." There was silence on the line, then a soft sigh. "You can't take it back, but you can stand here, now, and maybe we can try again." When the call ended, Sandra sat frozen, her phone clutched in her hand. Her heart raced, torn between relief and fear. She wanted to rebuild that bond, but she was terrified of failing again. Later that night, Keanu came over. He noticed her pale face the moment she opened the door. "What happened?" he asked gently. She told him everything, her words spilling out like a flood. When she finished, she looked at him desperately. "What if I'm not strong enough to make it right? What if I ruin it again?" Keanu studied her carefully, then spoke in his calm, steady way. "Strength isn't about never failing. It's about showing up, even when you're afraid. And you're showing up now." Her tears slipped down her face, but his words steadied her. "Will you be there with me?" she asked softly. "Always," he replied without hesitation. The next day, Sandra arranged to meet her old friend. She was nervous, her stomach in knots, but Keanu drove her to the small café where they had agreed to sit down. He didn't go inside. Instead, he stayed outside, giving her space but ready if she needed him. When Sandra walked in, her eyes met the friend she once loved, like family. Time had changed them both. Lines of age, scars of experience. But in the eyes, there was still something familiar. The conversation began awkwardly, full of long pauses and careful words. But slowly, walls began to break. They shared memories, laughter, even tears. At one point, her friend said softly, "You were not there when I needed you most. But maybe this time, you will be." Sandra reached across the table, her hand trembling. "I will," she whispered. "I don't want to lose this again." Outside, Keanu watched through the window. He didn't intrude. He didn't need to. He could see the healing beginning, and that was enough. Later, when Sandra walked out of the cafe, her eyes were red, but her face carried a lightness Keanu had not seen in a long time. She walked straight to him and said quietly, "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without knowing you were here." He smiled gently. "You did it yourself. I just stood nearby." But even as they stood together, both of them felt it. This was not the end of the storm. It was only the calm between two battles. The world outside was still waiting, watching, ready to test them again, and soon a choice would come that would push their friendship to its deepest test yet, forcing them both to decide how much they were willing to risk for each other and for the truth they held inside. The promise kept. Days after Sandra reconnected with her old friend felt different. She still had doubts, but for the first time in years, she also felt hope. Rebuilding trust was not easy, but she knew it was possible, and she knew she wasn't walking the path alone. Keanu stayed near, as steady as ever. He never demanded her attention, never pulled her into more than she could carry. He simply stood beside her, reminding her through his presence that real friendship did not need to shout. It only needed to stay. But the world outside did not let go so easily. The media grew louder, asking questions, creating stories. One headline even claimed Keanu and Sandra were hiding something, twisting their friendship into rumors that made her heart sink. She felt the old fear rise again, the fear of being judged, of losing control of her own story. One night, she broke down in her living room. Tears ran down her face as she whispered, "I can't keep fighting everyone. It's too much." Keanu sat across from her, his voice steady but gentle. "Then don't fight them. Let them say what they want. The truth isn't in their words. It's in how you live." She looked at him, her voice breaking. "But what if people never see the truth?" He leaned forward, his eyes calm and clear. "The ones who matter already see it, and the rest, they were never holding your heart in the first place." Those words sank deep, stronger than anything else. In that moment, she realized the lesson Keanu had been teaching her all along. Life wasn't about proving herself to the world. It was about living honestly, with kindness and resilience, and letting that be enough. The next morning, Sandra made a choice. She called her manager, her voice firm. "From now on, I will not live by fear of headlines. I will choose my projects, my time, my life. If that costs me roles or sponsors, so be it. I won't lose myself again." The silence on the other end was heavy, but finally her manager replied, "If this is what you want, then I'll support it." After the call, Sandra sat back, her hands shaking, but her spirit steady. She felt free. Later that evening, she met Keanu in the same cafe where their journey had begun weeks ago. The rain tapped softly on the windows again, as if the world itself remembered. They sat across from each other, and for a long time, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Finally, Sandra whispered, "You reminded me of who I am. You reminded me what friendship really means. I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." Keanu smiled faintly, his voice low. "True friendship doesn't ask for thanks. It only asks that you carry it forward. One day, someone else will need you the way you needed me. When that time comes, you'll know what to do." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were from gratitude. Deep, honest gratitude. They sat together in silence, watching the rain, their hearts calm. No rumors, no headlines, no noise could touch the truth between them. Keanu's single quotes, as humble gesture. The one that began with simple words years ago, "You are enough," had come full circle. It had not only reminded Sandra of true friendship, but it had also saved her from losing herself completely. And as the rain slowed and the sky began to clear, Sandra realized that storms would always come, but as long as there was truth, humility, kindness, and respect, she would never face them alone again.